Shepherd program is a poverty studies and community development program that offers coursework and community engagement opportunities to students in the college, the Williams School, and the law school here at Washington.
Incoming students to Washington Lee should really consider the Shepherd program. From the very first time you step onto campus, you can get involved with volunteer venture. That translates into being able to take a gateway class, get involved in the local community. I just think that the Shepherd program really enriches a student's 4 years.
There are a number of ways that students can get involved in the Shepherd program. So some of those are academic, so you can take different courses. You could take Poverty Studies 101, of course that would be the introductory course, and you could also take Poverty 102, which is the fieldwork course. You can also do extracurriculars, so that would be like getting involved in Neighbor Service League and going on service trips or participating in the annual service days. And actually after you take your introductory Poverty 101 course, then you become eligible for all of the internships that they offer.
Whatever your particular interest, and however much you can be involved, you're welcome to Shepherd. There are students who do mainly coursework, there are students who do mainly community service, and then the bulk of students do some combination of the two.
What I think is most wonderful about the Shepherd program, and especially being here in the community in Rockbridge, is the relationship building across the community, giving students the opportunity to get off of campus and really get to know names and faces and build relationships in the community.
Students take away from the Shepherd program a confidence, but also a humility, that they're ready to work together effectively and respectfully with others. Because we pair students with community agencies that are actually addressing the real problems associated with poverty, students come away not only understanding what is happening and what ought to be happening, but they develop the skills and the insights necessary to actually make that difference.
The Shepherd program is an interdisciplinary program, and what that means is that it's not just based in the philosophy department, and it's not just based in the sociology department or economics or psychology. And so when you're taking classes to count towards a Pov minor, you get to take a ton of different courses. And while they may seem slightly unrelated, they're actually enormously complementary. And so to fully understand a problem, you don't just want to approach it from one perspective.
I think that it's helpful for me as a student because I interact with opinions that I never would have in the first place. And I think it's really helpful for the entire class discussion because you can look at one particular issue and attack it from a lot of different levels. And that always, in my experience, has opened my eyes to ways of thinking about different issues, whether it be healthcare or criminal justice reform.
The Shepherd program has enormous benefits for students, not just those who minor, but for all students who are exposed to POV classes or who are even simply in classes with other poverty minors. One of the things that I think is great about the POV minor is that it doesn't just help students follow careers into social justice and into nonprofits, but it also helps them regardless of what career they go into. So if a student is going to go to med school or go to law school or go into consulting, having a better understanding of a large segment of the population and the struggles that they face on a daily basis can really make them better at their jobs, can make them better citizens, and can certainly make them more informed voters.
I think the Shepherd program has really a strong following and is deeply important to students and alumni because of the relationships they've built, because of the way that their learning in the classroom has just kind of rocked their perspective on the world that they live in and what they can do to make it a better place.
It helps students get a broader perspective on society and how other factors that they may not have considered earlier impact their own lives and the careers that they choose to pursue. And it taught me an incredible amount about how to approach an issue not just from the scientific perspective, but to consider those other disciplines too.
In our motto, we say that we're not unmindful of the future, and I think that poverty, because it's one of the most pressing concerns of our time and pretty much of every time, the Shepherd program prepares students to take on leadership roles in those conversations.
It's embodying those qualities that we've always said WNL is about. It's about leadership, it's about community, it's about honor. It's a real life example of so many of those things.
And the point of everything we do is to cultivate in students the intellectual and civic virtues that are at the heart of the WNL mission.
there. I guess I will put the top. Oops. You put yours over here. There you go. Is that you right there? Good evening, everybody. Hi to you. Hi. I am Bo Dudley, class of 1974-1979 law, and it's my privilege to be the Executive Director of Alumni Engagement at Washington and Lee. On behalf of everyone here, a very warm welcome home. This is the opening event of Alumni Weekend, so we are officially underway. Now, by my observation, we had about a 5-minute passing shower a little while ago, so great job by the Weather Committee. We're going to keep you in place, but we're going to be monitoring the rest of the weekend, and we will appoint new members if you start messing it up. Whatever happens with the weather, it's not going to dampen our spirits on the largest alumni celebration of the year here on campus. The extended University Advancement Team has worked hard and joyfully to craft this large weekend. Let's give them a big round of applause. This is a signature event on our campus. Washington and Lee, as you know better than anyone, is blessed with alumni who care deeply about this place, and we are always glad to have you back on campus. We have planned what we hope is a busy, fun, and stimulating weekend. We're grateful that you have invested time and resources to be here. We plan to send you home happy. Special round of applause for the great class of 1969 here celebrating their 50th reunion. Gentlemen, in your packets is a good-looking lapel pin. You may have noticed it. It recognizes your soon-to-be status as a 5-star general. 5-star generals are those who have already experienced their 50th reunion. Do not put it on until Sunday morning. Now, until about 10 years ago, your 50th reunion meant that although you would always be welcome back on campus, there were no real official reunions for you. But I have very good news. About 10 years ago, we began what is called the 5-Star Festival. So we're going to give you next year off only, and then you'll be invited to that 5-Star Festival every year from now on. So you are far from done with campus reunions. We pay particular attention to 55, 60, and 65, and we look forward to having you back as often as you can be here. Before our program continues, in the last year, the university lost some beloved members of this community. Let's pause to remember them. Former faculty and members of the administration: John DeVote, David Dickens, David Elms, Tom Litzenberg, Barlow Newbolt, Mario Pellicciaro, Halford Ryan, John Stuckey, and Tom Williams. Former staff members: Bert Carlson, Florence Cook, Lee Dudley, and Boyd Horn. And finally, 2 very beloved friends of this university: Annette John, widow of Lou John, former Dean of Students, and Ann Wilson, widow of our former president, John Wilson. Let's have a moment of silence for them. Thank you. Our first official activity is the spring ceremony for Omicron Delta Kappa, which most of us know is the National Leadership Society founded on this campus in 1914. So that means that come this December, they will celebrate their 105th anniversary. I want to recognize 3 special guests from— First, Dr. Tara Singer, the talented National Executive Director; Professor Kevin Finch, who is the faculty advisor to ODK, and Professor Linda Hooks, who is the former faculty advisor and now the National Vice President of ODK. Let's recognize them. Now it's a pleasure to introduce Senior Rosella Gabriel, the president of the W&L Alpha Circle of ODK. She is a senior from St. Louis, majoring in physics and global politics. She is a Johnson Scholar and the co-president of Amnesty International on this campus. She serves as a tutor in the Writing Center and in calculus and physics, and she's given lessons to local elementary school girls. She is a leader in Women in Science and Technology and an editor for the Political Review. In her spare time, Rosella is a first-year student resident advisor, and she also works through the First Generation Low Income Partnership to make the campus welcoming. Rosella, thank you for your contributions as a student, and we welcome you to lead the ODK tapping ceremony.
Thank you, Director Dudley, for that kind introduction. I believe that 105 looks really good on ODK. I would also like to welcome our distinguished guests, students, faculty, and friends as we gather to celebrate the extraordinary accomplishments of our new initiates and anticipate their continued excellence in leadership, both here at Washington and Lee and in communities across the world. Just over a century ago, a select group of 15 Washington and Lee students and faculty leaders founded ODK to bring together leaders involved in the various spheres of college activities for the general good of the institution. Since its founding, the Society has sought to honor those students, faculty, alumni, and community members who best demonstrate the areas recognized by the Society: scholarship, athletics, service, journalism, and the arts. Many of our initiates excel in more than one of these fields, while others represent incredible depth within a single sphere. At its core, what is leadership? I was raised to know leadership as service. I was taught that leadership from ego is frail, that willpower fades when focused in service of oneself, but harnessing the joys of those we serve makes leadership a worthy endeavor. All our initiates today lead in formal, accountable ways. But they also lead simply by building empathetic relationships and empowering those around them. You all have the potential to improve the world around you by serving others through inclusive, humble, and bold leadership. I am humbled by the previous accomplishments and future trajectories of my fellow students and honorary initiates honored here today. And if we could call our tappers to the stage, we will now recognize each of our initiates through the traditional tapping ceremony. I will begin today with our honorary initiates. I will recognize each individually, and I ask that you hold your applause until all have been introduced. Maurice Cole. Mo earned his BA in Sociology and Anthropology in 1994. While at W&L, he held leadership positions in the Minority Student Association, now SABU, and participated in the Student Recruitment Committee, Fancy Dress Committee, and Independent Student Union during that time. After graduation, Mo forged a career in social service and public health. He focused on this hard work for 5 years as a caseworker at Lighthouse Youth Services in Cincinnati, Ohio, specializing in the treatment and rehabilitation of adolescent sexual offenders. In 2000, Mo moved north to Cleveland, Ohio, where he joined the Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics at Case Western Reserve University. Currently, Mo serves on the advisory board of the Northeast Ohio Alumni Chapter and is a member of the Class of '94 Reunion Committee. Jenny Elms. A product of Lexington Public Schools, Jenny was in one of the first classes of women to enter Washington and Lee University. She majored in English literature and creative writing, and was the first woman to win the Mahoney Sophomore English Writing Award. Jenny minored in creative writing, philosophy, and art history. She credits Pam Simpson as her mentor and says the two volunteered together for the predecessor of Project Horizon. sharing beeper duties while training the first group of student volunteers. Jenny and some friends also started Live Drive, the predecessor to the Traveler Safe Ride program. She lived in Boulder, Colorado after graduation and volunteered for the rape crisis team there for 3 years. She later returned to Lexington to raise her family and start Full Circle Catering, and has managed to run her business and raise her family as a single mom while also serving on the board of the Lexington Rockbridge Chamber of Commerce and as a Project Horizon board member for 6 years, among other volunteer work. Today, she is a board member for Meals for Shut-ins and is the chair and director for the second annual Women in Leadership event. Full Circle Catering is the winner for the second straight year of the Greenest Caterer in Virginia Award and was named for 2 years as the top green provider by Food Logistics magazine. Randolph Hare is the executive director of University Facilities at Washington and Lee. Mr. Harris served as assistant and associate director and then director of maintenance and operations at W&L before assuming his current executive role. A leader in his field nationally, he has served on the board of the Association of Physical Plant Administrators, including a term as president. He is also certified in HVAC mechanical systems and is a member of the Professional Construction Estimators Association and the Association for Facilities Engineering. In Lexington, he serves on the Work Culture and Compensation Subcommittee for Strategic Planning for Kendall Retirement Community. He's also served on the Planning and Organizing Regional Committee for Disaster Relief Activities. Henry L. Roediger III is the James S. McDowell Distinguished University Professor at Washington University in St. Louis. He graduated from Washington and Lee University, received his PhD at Yale, and has taught previously at Purdue, Rice, and the University of Toronto. Roediger's research has centered on human learning and memory, and he has published about 350 articles and chapters on these topics. In 2012, he was named William James Fellow for Lifetime Achievements in Psychology from the Association for Physiological Science. And in 2017, he received the John P. McGovern Award from the American Association for the Advancement of Science. He has served as president of the Association of Physiological Science and the Society of Experimental Psychology and Cognitive Science. Roediger has also served as editor of the Journal of Experimental Psychology. He has been elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and the National Academy of Sciences. Mai Spurlock Sykes. After graduating from W&L, Mai received a master's in ancient history from the University of St. Andrews. She now works in film and has made multiple award-winning short films with her sister Kim, including the Student Academy Award-winning Down in Number 5, a Southern Gothic tale of a coal miner pushed to his limits for the love of his son. They also have a web series titled Livin' the Dream. It is a comedic take on the lengths of a Brooklyn filmmaker, or the lengths that a Brooklyn filmmaker will go to get her first feature film made. Mai lives in the New York City area with her husband Scott, also class of '94, and 2 daughters, Augusta and Ellie. Let's have a warm round of applause for our amazing honorary initiates. At this time, we will recognize our ODK class of 2020 initiates, the junior class. Notably, many of them are abroad for spring term. Hannah Archer. Lee Francis Bernstein. Nancy Emma Ernst. James Wallace Jimmy Fleck. Joseph Daniel Trust Jast. Brianna Anita Karpowicz. Lane Kelly Smith. Let's celebrate our junior initiates. And finally, I have the honor of presenting the Latour Award. This award is named after one of the original ODK founders, a legend at Washington and Lee, and is given each year to a sophomore who has demonstrated outstanding leadership potential. This year's recipient is Sawara Khan, and she is currently in wash term, so she won't be here tonight. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Rosella, and final congratulations again to the Honorary and Student Initiates. You bring great credit to Washington and Lee, and we know you will do so for years to come. Thank you. The phrase "needs no introduction" may have been written to describe our keynote speaker, both on this campus and certainly with alumni. He serves as Senior Advisor to President Will Dudley and as Secretary to the Board of Trustees. Those important titles do not begin to capture Jim Farrar's value on this campus, so I will try. If we need a steady hand and an experienced pro, we call our speaker. If we need humility, someone who deflects credit and puts the university first every time, we get Jim. If we need to call on the best memory bank for the history of Washington and Lee and its people, we call Jim. If you want Exhibit A for a prodigious work ethic, early to bed, early rise, and all of that, we look to our speaker. If we want thoughtful input on the value and place of Division III athletics, Jim has surely been there and done that. If anybody here tries to find that one document or report that you just have to have and you cannot find, you very quickly remember, don't worry about it. Call Jim Farrar. If a campus committee on any subject needs a clear head and keen attention to detail, Jim gets that nod. Now, of course, the trustee meetings need to be expertly prepared and organized. Jim, let's be fair. Your assistant, Catherine Brinkley, gets a lot of that credit. And of course, President Dudley wants sage advice, sober judgment, the long view, and a complete absence of misdirected hustle. And so he relies on our speaker. When you or I say Washington and Lee University, a very few people come immediately to mind because they are so tightly woven into the fabric of this great university. We are lucky to have him, and best of all, he wouldn't trade it for anything. Jim has kindly agreed to share some reflections from his approximately 66 years in and around Lexington and on this campus, and his deep connections to the university he loves. Please welcome your friend and mine, Jim Farrar, class of 1974.
Bo, thank you for that very kind introduction. A little bit overdone, except for the tribute to Catherine Brinkley and all that she does for everyone. But thank you again. I'm flattered to have been asked to speak tonight, and I'm very happy to be here. And let me quickly add my thanks, Bo, to you and Mary and Tom and your staff and all others who made this weekend possible. We know how much goes into it. To the reunionists, let me thank you and for being here, and let me join Bo and President Dudley in extending a warm welcome home with particular congratulations to the classes 69 and 94 for their on the occasion of their 50th and 25th reunions. And finally, a big welcome back and congratulations to our class, Bo and I, members of the class of 74, congratulating our class for turning out in record numbers and being here, setting a new bar for attendance at the 45th reunion with 91 classmates. And a thank you to co-chairs Tony McCord, Russ Chambliss, and the entire committee. I consider myself very fortunate to have a long history with Washington and Lee. Almost 108 years ago, in June of 1911, my great-grandfather delivered the baccalaureate sermon. 3 months later, my grandfather enrolled in the class of 1915. My father graduated in 1949, and 2 years later, he left graduate school early to accept Frank Gillam's invitation to return and teach English and work with him in the admissions office. And yes, no small number of us in this room this evening are very grateful to both of them for the close calls on admissions that went their way. I appeared in Lexington in November of 1952. As we grew aware of our surroundings, my fellow faculty brats and I became convinced that the W&L campus had been placed here solely for our enjoyment. And Lee McLaughlin, Marshall Washburn, Chuck Williams, Taylor Cole, and I were shocked when we learned we could not come and go as we pleased. When he wasn't saving students from themselves and their ill-considered plans, University proctor Charles Murph Murray was throwing us out of Doremus Gym and teaching us some significant life lessons along the way. Growing up in Lexington in the 50s and 60s can best be described as a combination of Leave It to Beaver meets Animal House. Lexington was big enough to satisfy our youthful curiosity, yet small enough so that everyone knew who you were. We walked downtown on Saturday mornings for cartoons at the State Theater. We would hang out at Doc's Corner Grill with the students and cadets. We ate pizza at the College Inn with owner Pete Neophotis in the midst of all those promotional photographs of VMI and W&L football players poised in those mid-air positions that were never replicated on the field. And though we idolized the students and cadets, they really weren't always the best role models. But they did provide a rich resource for parents looking to hone their teachable moment skills. Our family was driving to church one Sunday morning in the early 1960s. I was probably 10 or 11, and my father brought the family station wagon to a halt on Main Street at the light in front of the Lexington Presbyterian Church. He pulled up behind a silver MG convertible driven by the star wide receiver on the football team, a very cool guy by the name of Bill David, class of 1965. And Bill had given his car a name, and I thought this was really cool. There in black letters on the trunk of the car was the name, and with apologies, the Silver Bitch. Well, after an interminable 5-second pause, all of us started in at once. My father was chuckling as if to say, "I can't believe this." My brother and I were howling in the back seat. And my mother, well, let's just say that our June Cleaver composed herself in a manner intended to eliminate any effect of Bill David's coolness, informed Wally and the Beaver that what he has done is not funny, while making it very clear to Ward that he had to take care of that tomorrow. But Wally and the Beaver vowed to follow Bill David's example and do precisely the same thing when we grew up. It was actually a pretty harmless moment in the grand scheme of things, but in 1962 it qualified as a teachable moment. Fast forward to the early 70s, painting a catchy name on my car was probably not going to be a good idea, but nevertheless I had a great 4 years here. My classmates and I felt our way through the maze of distribution requirements and potential majors, of courses and professors that you simply had to take. or avoid, and we were just waiting for that moment when the light bulb would go off and our paths forward would become clear. I well remember some of my best liberal arts moments coming in the classes with the all-time greats like Sid Cowling, Bill Jenks, and Pam Simpson, and others. Though the tragic and untimely 1968 death of football coach Lee McLaughlin denied many aspiring players the privilege of playing for him, the arrival of the class of '74 coincided with some pretty good recruiting classes for lacrosse coach Dick Slaza. And Jack Emmer's arrival as coach in 1972 helped vault the program to the top of the Division I rankings. The sport was entering a period of significant growth in the early '70s, and because W&L drew well from the traditional lacrosse hotbeds, we were able to compete very favorably against the best of both Division I and Division III. Coach Emmer used to quip that having my father as Dean of Admissions was like having another assistant coach in the administration. The lacrosse program was a very important unifying force during the otherwise turbulent '70s and '80s, and those spring weekends in Lexington, beating the likes of UNC and Navy and UVA, really were very special. 12 years later, in 1986, I was an administrator and teacher and coach at the Episcopal High School in Alexandria, when Director of Development, Ferris Hotchkiss, and Alumni Director, Dick Sessoms, offered me the opportunity to return to Lexington as Assistant Alumni Director. I jumped at the chance, and for 33 years, I've had the opportunity to do important work with folks far above my pay grade. But I do recognize I've had an unusual career in the sense that I've had but 2 employees in 45 years, and by any standard, that's an unusually low number. But the school world suited me, and it's been important to me that the goals of these institutions have been highly aspirational. In addition to their educational responsibilities, both take seriously their goals of cultivating character and leadership in their students, while encouraging them to become thoughtful and engaged citizens. I was reminded recently of how lucky we are to work in a place like this when I watched the classic Peter Sellers movie, Being There. In the movie, Sellers plays a simple-minded gardener named Chance, whose knowledge of life and the things around him comes exclusively through television and his garden. And through a series of garbled communications and misunderstandings, Chance, the gardener, becomes Chauncey Gardner and is mistaken for a brilliant and insightful advisor. He had no idea how he got there, nor where he was going, but the movie's running joke is that nobody else does either. Sellers' character becomes a celebrated intellectual without having to account for himself because the people around him were too indifferent to call him on it and all too willing to accept sound over substance. I've been very fortunate to be able to spend my career in communities that refuse to let that happen. Throughout my experience here, I've been surrounded by remarkable men and women at all levels whose shared vision and commitment have helped make W&L a very special place. I'm proud to say that the same spirit and institutional commitment is here today under President Dudley, his leadership team, and W&L employees up and down the line. I've been in a position to watch our university evolve and prosper alongside the best administrative colleagues one could hope for, 7 presidents, including acting presidents Larry Betch and Harlan Beckley, 5 different rectors, including Phil Norwood, who along with Larry Betch are here this weekend for their 50th reunion, and scores of trustees, 7 alone from the undergraduate class of 1969. And throughout my years here and throughout our broader institutional history, one of the most consistent and most significant themes has been that of continuity and change. How W&L has adapted to the internal and external forces that call for change. Now, W&L will never be accused of being on the bleeding edge of change. In fact, it's been suggested at times that we are closer to the back edge, and that's not always been a bad thing. But change at W&L has always been informed by continuity. W&L is organic, and like all living things, it must grow and evolve. And fortunately, W&L's leadership has been adept at managing generational change while maintaining that continuity. For those of you who haven't been back on campus in a while, you've no doubt been struck by the physical changes that you've seen. Perhaps the most visible metaphor of our most deeply held institutional values is the colonnade, which has been renovated in sublime fashion over the last decade. The exterior looks the same as it did following Tucker Hall's rebuilding in 1936, but the infrastructure is now all 21st century. Not long ago, Gillum Dorm yielded to a new outdoor plaza between Gaines Hall and Graham Lee's, and shockingly, Graham Lee's now has air conditioning. Up on the old alumni field, we now have a modern on-campus housing complex for upper division students. Our thriving arts program is now housed in the Lenfest Center and Wilson Hall, and DuPont Hall now boasts the addition of the Ruscio Center for International Education. We've built a new natatorium, and we're in the process of reinventing our other indoor athletic facilities. Along the way, the names of buildings have changed. The Warner Center has become the Duchossois Athletic and Recreation Center. McCormick Library is now Huntley Hall. The University Library is now Leyburn Library. Robinson Hall has been renamed Chavis Hall. Tomorrow, we dedicate the Simpson House, and the essence of what goes on in those buildings is the same today as it has been for generations. University programs, policies, operating procedures have also evolved. We no longer have Saturday classes. Students don't wear coats and tie to class. Thankfully, our first-year students don't have to wear beanies. And the class of '69 remembers when the exam schedule was dictated by the university. It's hard to believe, but self-scheduled exams are a mere 50-year tradition at W&L. Institutional finances have evolved as university programs have grown. Today's operating budgets are in the magnitude of $150 million, but when the classes of '69 and '74 roamed the campus, the budgets were on the order of $5 to $7 million. When the late President Bob Huntley took office in 1968, he inherited a very fragile institution, best described in his own words. Quote, "Not to put too fine a point on it, but the school was broke," end quote. It's a classic Bob Huntley line. Just weeks after taking office, President Huntley had to walk downtown to the First National Bank to take out a short-term loan to cover W&L's payroll obligations. A couple of months later, after the tuition payments had come in, he walked back downtown and paid off the loan. And he had to repeat that cycle on more occasions than he cared to remember. Unbeknownst to the class of 1969, as they prepared to graduate, the university was operating quite literally from paycheck to paycheck. President Huntley loved to talk about what he called W&L's guardian angels that appeared on our institutional shoulder whenever we needed help. Now, it can be argued that Bob Huntley was himself one of those guardian angels. But on those occasions when he walked downtown to the bank, he knew things had to change. He knew he had to harness the passion and dedication of the W&L family, and he resolved to take alumni affairs and development what today is called university advancement, and make them an integral part of the university's business model. Thanks to his hard work and to those who followed him, W&L has developed what can only be described as one of the finest alumni engagement programs in higher education. In 1968, the endowment controlled by W&L was $20.5 million, and the largest gift to W&L in its history to that point was $9 million from Sidney and Francis Lewis to build a new law school. Today, the value of the endowment that W&L controls is well over $1 billion, and the largest gift to W&L has been Rupert Johnson's transformational $100 million gift for the Johnson Program in Leadership and Integrity. We've come a long way in 50 years, and we are very fortunate, but we didn't get where we are today by dumb luck. President Huntley used the term guardian angel. What he was really talking about was how fortunate W&L has been to have had great leadership combined with passionate and dedicated alumni. At various inflection points in our history, when we have needed it the most, W&L has had exceptional leadership. And that leadership, our presidents, our boards of trustees, great administrators, and passionate, committed alumni, individually and collectively, have put the institution in a position to succeed. They have successfully responded to challenges by selecting the right person for a particular position, by investing wisely, or by being disciplined enough to make prudent, forward-looking decisions. And most important, they managed those challenges without sacrificing the essence of the institution. In those moments, when change has been necessary for the institution to advance, W&L's leadership teams and our alumni base have proved that together there is nothing this institution cannot achieve. I'll cite a few examples of that leadership. President Gaines' 1946 decision to hire a new dean of the college by the name of Jim Leyburn was not without its detractors. The so-called Leyburn Plan of the 1950s would become the foundation of W&L's academic program for decades to come. But who could ever consider Dean Leyburn a threat to the status quo? Blaine Brownell writes in Volume 2 of W&L's Institutional History, Washington and Lee, 1930 to 2000, quote, "One can imagine the range of faculty reactions to Leyburn's call to greatness that challenged the usual way of doing things and pointed out deficiencies in faculty, students, curriculum, and even tradition," end quote. Jim Leyburn knew of the challenges of leadership, and it took courage for him to shake up the faculty and move the academic program forward. In 1954, W&L faced the biggest challenge to its honor system in school history. The Board of Trustees canceled that year's football schedule due to a cheating scandal that involved numerous student athletes. This decision effectively ended subsidized athletics at W&L. Frank Gaines and his Board of Trustees understood the consequences of inaction, but they drew withering criticism for making that decision. A quick glance at the state of D1 athletics today demonstrates the wisdom of that choice. But of course, the most important outcome was that the honor system survived the challenge and remained at the heart of the institution. The 1966 matriculation of Dennis Haston and Leslie Smith, the first two African Americans at the undergraduate and law schools respectively, were important moments of change and courage. In May of 1969, campuses all over the country were undergoing disruption and protest over the Vietnam War. Facing demands that W&L close early, President Huntley kept the university open with his insistence that the W&L way was to provide an environment in which individuals with different convictions could reason together without rancor or intolerance and deal responsibly with complex issues. The board's 1984 decision to co-educate laid the foundation for W&L's 35-year trajectory to the top echelon of America's finest liberal arts institutions. But it took courage for President Wilson and the board to make that happen. President Russio's 2014 decision to remove the replica Confederate flags from this chapel and the university's 2016 introduction of a historical marker to recognize the enslaved men and women owned by Washington College in the 19th century were important moments. And the current board and President Dudley have been resolute in facing head-on the challenges to a comprehensive and transparent telling of our institutional history. 50 years after the 1969 decision to keep the university open, President Dudley invoked similar language in addressing the university's history when he challenged the community to do what it has always done by addressing difficult, controversial issues with civility and respect, and in so doing, provide a model for the nation. Managing evolution and change is always challenging, but it has been made easier at W&L because of our unwavering intergenerational commitment to our core values and mission, our institutional DNA. Blaine Brownell also notes that in the 7 decades since President Gaines took office, Washington and Lee has been transformed. But more important is the fact that our institutional ethos and our most important traditions remain central to our mission. The university's leadership during that era took a tradition-laden institution, reluctant to change, and kept it relevant and well-positioned for the years ahead. At Founders Day, January of 1986, the late President John Wilson made the following observations, quote, "All universities, to be worthy of their high calling, must come to terms with both stability and change, must somehow reconcile the periodic clash of old and new ideas with an obligation to preserve that which has lasting value. Permanence and change, stability and tradition, faithfulness to old ideals, and an openness to the new, the untried. These are marks of a confident, historic university, certain of its character and purpose. And I find true signs of this openness everywhere I look at Washington and Lee." End quote. 33 years later, John Wilson's words still ring true. As you look around you this weekend, you'll find evidence of what he spoke about, and you can see those same themes present in the university's current strategic plan. W&L understands permanence and change. It understands the importance of being faithful to old ideals while being open to the new. It is an institution confident in its character and purpose. I hope each of you shares the pride in what our university has accomplished in the recent decades. With our continued support, W&L can face the future with confidence because of our shared commitment to our core values and mission. Thank you for being here. We are grateful for your presence. Be safe this weekend and have a great time. Thank you.
And now you know why Jim and I refer to the decade of the 70s as the greatest generation here at Washington and Lee. He's a treasure, and Jim, we thank you. We know the amount of work that kind of presentation takes, and we are in your debt. You're in for a treat when you exit this historic Lee Chapel. While we have been in here, the student members of our organization called Cathicon, which is basically training future alumni leaders, have been out, shall we say, decorating the front lawn. So we thank them for that. When the colonnade renovation was finished some years ago, we also decided that it was past time to shine a permanent light on Old George on top of Washington Hall in the evening hours. So you'll see that and some other special treats when you walk out. You are very cordially invited to go just 100 yards or so up to the right to the Hotchkiss Alumni House. We are delighted to have the opening reception there for all of you and all of your friends. That'll run till about 11 o'clock, and then we're off and running in the morning. We're delighted you're here. Thank you so much. We're adjourned.